Welcome everyone to the Graph's first protocol town hall. So excited to see over 170 people here. So that's really exciting for us, at the foundation. Just wanted to firstly thank everyone for coming on this journey with us. It's been over 6 months of us engaging with indexers, starting on the testnet, where we had over 200 indexers set up, over 90 countries. And now we have over 160 on mainnet with over 5,000 delegators. So I think this is like a round of applause for everyone. The community has been so fruitful and helpful in bringing in new users, and we'd love to see it. Next, I just want to, bring up a few of the things that we're focusing on in the foundation and how that might relate to you. So we've got a few members of the Graph Council here, from Livepeer, from Zeppelin, who are also here to help out. But one of the other focuses has been grants. So we've been doing a lot of interviews across protocol infrastructure, decentralized applications, community building, and really encourage you indexers to apply if you have any either community, operations or building initiatives or, indexer improvements. And even on the indexer side, we've had a few great initiatives start, such as Know Your Indexer, which is highlighting an indexer every week. We have, this week in indexing, so highlighting the events or initiatives that week. And then also are continuing to do indexer office hours. And so we'll also do the same for curation as that sets up on the network. And lastly, wanted to just give a shout out to everyone who is excited about the multi-blockchain expansion. So we announced just last week that Near, Solana, Polkadot, and Celo will be the upcoming chains that we're expanding to. So would love to see your support as we get there. And now I'll pass it off to Brandon, who's going to kick off what we've been doing with the GIP process.
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, great to see so many familiar faces here. And I'll echo what Eva said about just being blown away by all the community contributions in the last month plus, and obviously before that as well. So today I'm going to be talking about the GIP process that we're proposing. Like other GIP processes, this is actually a self-bootstrapping process, as we've seen in other protocols. Let me just make sure I've got the right browser up here. Perfect. So GIP 001 is basically what's going to define this process. We're going to be hosting these GIPs in a Radical repository. So I don't know how many folks are familiar with Radical on the call, but it's kind of the decentralized version of GitHub. Eventually, it's going to have workflows like PRs and issues, et cetera. And like we're really big believers in like pioneering and like dogfooding crypto native tools and workflows. And so that's where we're starting with the as the place for storing these GIPs, and like we look forward to kind of community feedback as you guys try out these new tools along with us. So rather than like read through all this, which I think would be kind of unexciting, I'm going to kind of walk through this diagram for you because that's I think where a lot of the meat of this proposal is kind of contained. So we can hop over to a slightly bigger version. And as we were putting this together, we kind of looked at pretty much every proposal process in the space. We looked at SIPs, LIPs, EIPs, PEPs, BIPs, JavaScript's TC39, just kind of drowning in three-letter acronyms along the way. But we tried to, take a pragmatic approach of just enough structure and pulling the best parts that we really resonated with from those different processes. And, folks from several of those teams, including Ethereum, Livepeer, and Synthetix, were generous enough to offer their feedback on this model. So the meat of the proposal process, the part that's going to be actually managed in the GIP repo itself, is kind of this flow that you see here. So there's a few different lanes depending on the type of proposal that's being worked on. The kind of main one that most folks will think about are GIPs, which are improvements and changes to the protocol. Could also be improvements to processes that surround the protocol or the ecosystem. But these are things typically that are going to involve changes to graph node, to the subgraph API, to the smart contracts. They might require a protocol upgrade, those types of changes. GRCs are similar to ERCs in the Ethereum community in the sense that these are application layer standards that develop. So like right now we don't have a lot of standardization across the ecosystem and how to build subgraphs and like what are the application layer patterns for incorporating subgraphs into your app. We think, as in the future subgraphs support, more features such as like pipelining, data across subgraphs, or doing composition at query time across subgraphs. Having some level of standardization actually will make it a lot easier for subgraphs to compose, right? Being able to implement common interfaces. And then the last one here is GRPs. And this is basically a way of kind of like helping the community find the most valuable problems to work on at any given point in time. So obviously, like the initial team and early contributors that have been working on the graph have been thinking about this problem for a long time. And it's probably not surprising to learn that we've, personally only worked on maybe a small percentage of like the long-term problems and opportunities that we see in the space. And so by like formalizing and like defining these problems really clearly, it kind of gives other contributors, in the ecosystem a way to just kind of jump in and like hop into a meaty problem, right? So that might be like, what is the best way to design mutations, in subgraphs, or, what is the best way to make the, the delegation market more efficient and dynamic. And so by really like specifying those problems well, you kind of create a common language and a common reference point for other community members to, to hop on and make contributions, which is what we want, right? We want to grow the ecosystem. We want to grow the, the community of collaborators. So I'll walk through the different stages in a moment, but before that, I want to like take a zoom out a little bit and kind of focus on the meta process here. So what happens in the repo isn't the whole story, right? Like there's stuff happening before, during, and after this process that makes it meaningful. So before, folks, before folks even create a proposal, I think, especially if you're, a new or early contributor to the graph, probably a good step is to hop in some of the forums, right? Talk to some of the existing contributors, talk to other people in the community, see if they have the same problem as you. Make sure that this is actually a problem worth solving and a problem worth your time of going through and like crafting this GIP, which is, we've tried to keep it lightweight, but it is a more involved process, right, than just posting, in the forum. We've already kicked off this process, by the way. So we've had some amazing forum posts and discussions over the last, month or so. I think we kicked off the forum in like early to mid January. So some of the speakers that we have today are folks that have actually posted ideas already in the forum and have been kind of driving conversations there. And that's going to continue throughout this process. But in addition, while a proposal is being worked on, you might do things like form working groups, so there might be other people in the community that have your same problem or have the same skills required to solve a given problem. And so, both the foundation and other members in the community can play a coordinating role and help bringing the right people together to solve a problem. We have graph improvement town halls like we're at today. Welcome, you made it to the first one. There'll be continued discussions in the forum as we discussed. And then we also have Snapshot community polling. And Dave's going to talk in more depth about this later in the session, but this is just a way of kind of gauging community sentiment from different stakeholder groups in the graph during the process. And again, this is all about building legitimacy for a proposal and increasing the likelihood that you as an author are spending your time in a valuable direction that's likely to be accepted by the wider community. So let's zoom back in really quick and we can get into the stages of these proposals. So GRCs and GRPs really only make it up to the draft stage, whereas GIPs have a couple stages after that. And the first three stages are roughly the same, for all three. The straw person is kind of the high level idea, right? So it's like if you were writing one of these proposals, from the template, which I'll get to in a second, this would kind of be like your abstract and your motivation, right? It's just like sort of the high level inkling of an idea. Maybe, the way of solving it isn't that concrete in your mind yet. You don't have a specific solution in mind, but you kind of want to put something out there to get comments. You want something out there to see like, hey, is it worth moving to the next step? The proposal is kind of a high level design, so think of this almost like a detailed PRD, right? Like there might be like high level architecture diagrams, there might be some pseudocode, there might be some math formulas. but it's still relatively at a high level, but someone should be able to walk away from a proposal with like an understanding of like, yeah, I get how this would work. And then a draft specification is really like almost at the level of like an engineering plan. You know, it's getting down into like the implementation details, like specific APIs, specific interfaces, different technical considerations should definitely be at this stage. If there's things around like backwards compatibility, interoperability, anything that's kind of affected at that level, like this should kind of, this should fully flesh out what the proposal is going to look like in practice. So GRCs and GRPs just kind of stop there, right? Once you're at this level of specificity, there's no, you know, it's really up to the community at that point to decide what to do with them. It's not about being accepted or rejected or deferred. GIPs keep moving as they're kind of intended to be accepted into the protocol eventually. So the next stage for draft specification is candidate, and the candidate stage indicates that there is a reference implementation that's been put out for this proposal that people can actually take a look at. They can try it out. Maybe it's deployed to the testnet. Maybe it's, you know, deployed to, you know, some hosted service somewhere. Maybe, you know, depending on the type of change, I think this is going to look different, right? If it's a smart contract change or a, you know, subgraph API change. So it's either going to be in a testnet, maybe it's implemented somewhere as behind an experimental flag, so it's not interfering with like core protocol logic. At this point, it can go through security audits. It can go through economic modeling and simulation if that's relevant. And really the validation criteria for these things is going to be different depending on what the, you know, what the type of change is. And so one of the things we'll have you actually specify in the template is how to validate this, this proposed change. And then the last things I'll kind of mention is the end of the process over here. So we'll start with the governance. So zooming out again real quick, you know, the purpose of this process is to kind of build legitimacy for changes that happen that are worked on by the community. It's not intended to be like a decentralized governance process itself, right? So there's going to be editors for this process. Initially, there'll be contributors who are really familiar with the protocol and, you know, and the code bases. But their role in moving stuff through this process is purely editorial. And what it means to get to the end of this process means that your proposal has had as much of an opportunity as possible to receive thoughtful comment by the community and kind of be given the spotlight, right? So like the most, the proposals with the most momentum behind them will be given, you know, speaking time at the town halls. They'll have community polls, and generally they have a chance to kind of build some inertia. And then actually getting those included in the protocol is, you know, the domain of decentralized governance. And so for the graph, initially that looks like the Graph Council. You know, in the future we've talked about more, you know, enfranchising even more folks in that process while kind of keeping the representative nature of what the Graph Council is today. And for the most part, the Graph Council is going to be, you know, voting on governance proposals. These proposals are kind of like a release train, right? So they might roll up a number of different GIPs and protocol changes. And then at that point, you know, typically they would give the community ample notice, and then, you know, after the vote, and then the proposal is going to be executed. And that might look like, typically that's going to require a transaction on chain. But sometimes the code changes might primarily be to, you know, nodes or, you know, other software that interacts with the protocol off chain. And then in rare cases, you know, if a change that's being worked on is security related, it's likely that the Graph Council would execute a governance proposal and then vote on the proposal for transparency reasons afterwards. And that's just, you know, because while the graph is kind of in this bootstrapping phase, right? We've only been on mainnet for, you know, under 2 months at this point. You know, it's necessary to kind of have that path, but in the future, we could see that going away as well. And similarly, we could even see, you know, there being a built-in waiting period after a proposal is voted on, similar to how you have in other protocols until a change can go into effect. The last thing I'll mention here is just that not all changes to the protocol have to go through this process, right? Like if you look at some of the various software repos that interact and comprise the protocol, things like GraphNode, things like indexer, agent indexer service. There's tons of like small GitHub issues, feature requests that are like sort of at the level of like minor enhancements that many of them might be too small to justify like a full GIP, right? Many of them would qualify probably, but there's a chance that these repos over time accumulate changes, you know, so maybe the graph node between releases accumulates a handful of enhancements that have kind of been made in the normal course of working on that code base. And then those can also get bundled into a release and still sort of be given the sign off by, you know, decentralized governance that, you know, hey, as of this epoch, graph node version, you know, whatever is the official version for, you know, the purposes of arbitration and forming POIs, et cetera. And in some cases, maybe there's N-1 support. So maybe it's a range of graph node versions that are, you know, that are supported. So I think that's enough for here. I'll quickly just touch on the template. All this stuff is going to be posted to the Radical repo. We'll be sharing the seed info for the remote in GitHub, or excuse me, not GitHub, in Discourse. So you'll be able to, everyone will be able to find the different Radical remotes that we're maintaining. The one thing I'll touch on here is that is this discussions too. Because right now we're starting with this Radical centric workflow, you'll post the place where the discussion is happening for your GIP in the GIP itself. And so that'll kind of divert people to, you know, presumably a forum post. And then the forum post can also reference the GIP that you've created and your remote that has the branch, you know, that GIP is on. And so that's kind of how we're going to do collaboration in the meantime, given that we won't have, you know, GitHub issues and PRs, but Radical team is working on a kind of crypto native version of PRs and issues. And so we expect that this process could change slightly in the future as, you know, we start dogfooding more and more of the functionality that they're working on. I think I've mostly touched on all the things here. I'll just mention that these are meant to be guidelines, you know, for the most part, not set in stone. Most of these sections are optional. You know, we want to be flexible here. We want to acknowledge that not every change to the protocol is the same. And so, you know, as an author of a proposal, you're encouraged to exercise good judgment in deviating from the standard or deviating from the template just to, you know, just to get your ideas across as effectively as possible. That's really the main goal, you know, according to the criteria that are laid out in each stage. So the GIP 001, like I said, mostly just has the information that I've kind of said verbally, so we won't go through all of this. It outlines the editors, outlines some of the required structure of a GIP, and obviously all proposals are going to be under Creative Commons, you know, in order to make contributions to you know, the open source community. So that's all I got. Eva, did you want to pause for questions and feedback here, or just kind of save that stuff to the end after we get through most of the agenda?
It might make sense to go one by one, just because we've got a lot to cover. So if any questions, post them in the chat and we'll surface them. And then if not, we can head over to Dave.
I don't see anything in the chat governance related.
Cool. Dave, do you want to take it?
Yes, let's do it. Unless those are, okay, great. Here we go. Can everybody see Snapshot? Good, okay, great. All right, so first I'm gonna dig in a little bit what Snapshot is. For all of you who are not aware of it, it's kind of just a decentralized voting governance application that's been created by Snapshot Labs, which has some relationships to Balancer, and a lot of the projects in the space have actually taken to using it and contributing to it. And as you can see, there's over 500 of them that are using it, and you'll recognize a lot of these names. Even if we click on balancer, you see how the application works. There's all these proposals, they're closed. That means people are voting on them. There's different types of proposals. We can't see them here in this UI, but you can have proposals from the community. You can have proposals from specific teams, maybe the council, or maybe Edge and Node, something like that. And it gives you a lot of flexibility. And we've created a page here, and it's still definitely a work in progress. And I'm going to explain what we're thinking Snapshot could be used for, but there's definitely feedback from the community as well. And after the town hall, we'll also be posting a post in Discourse to explain what Snapshot could be used for and how, and we want to get feedback from the community as well to see what they think. But I'm actually going to share this as well in, I want to find Zoom, if I can find the chat. I want to share it so people can go to it right now. So you can actually go there now if you're holding any GRT. And I'm quickly going to explain, how the voting process works and how we're scoring. But another thing to understand, this is kind of this scoring that's being proposed right now. There's no curators involved. It's just delegators, indexers, as well as GRT in the balance of a wallet. But this is also going to be like a work in progress, and the way that we've chosen the votes here can also be voted on in the future or talked about in Discourse and changed. And what we want to see is this is really voting for the community that can be done in a decentralized way. Anybody on Snapshot can actually propose a proposal to vote on in here. And you can also set a limit. You might have to have a score of 1 million, which could relate to 1 million GRT, or it could be different, as I'll explain in a second. But that would allow, people can't just spam the proposals, but it means anybody in the community with maybe 100,000 GRT would be able to submit a proposal, try to get share that proposal on Discourse, share it in Discord, share it on Twitter, and get other people to vote. And yeah, we just want to use this as another tool, essentially. One thing to note right now is, this is not the result of a Snapshot vote is not binding to the council. It's just another data point the council can use to make decisions on specific GIPs. And so that's how, it's a step in the direction for decentralized governance. And it's definitely something that'll help the council make decisions. So now I'm going to get into the specifics of what this test snapshot is doing and how the scoring is going to be done. So there's actually 3 strategies that are happening, and each strategy can be seen as a way to count a score on chain. So the most basic way to count the score on chain is just GRT that is in somebody's wallet. And what we've done with that one is I've given a description here, and actually I'll start. So we have 3 groups: delegators, indexers, and just graph token holders. And we've normalized their scoring so that each of these 3 groups is worth exactly 33%. And now I break it down a little bit here. Just hypothetically, if there were 100,000 GRT total, that's 100,000 votes. And then we end up normalizing the other 2 stakeholders up in the case that they are lower. And you would expect to see that there will be more GRT in wallets compared to total GRT staked. At least that's what we're seeing in the network today. So easily, if there's 20,000 GRT staked by indexers, they're going to get 5 votes for the score. And the same with delegators, 50,000 too. And just a little bit of description of how the UI actually works. We've named them BGRT, IGRT, and DGRT. And if you go hover up here, it doesn't always work there. It does work down here though. You can see, so this was me. I voted on this proposal just to check it out. This is just some test wallet I have. It has 25 GRT in the wallet, and it has 4.6 delegated GRT. So that score normalized up. I'm pretty sure I actually only have 1 delegated token on the network. So as you can see, that score has been times by 4.68. And this has been another feature of Snapshot is you choose a block to snapshot what your scores are at a specific time. And the reason for that is so when you're holding a vote, you don't want a shareholder in the protocol to be, or a stakeholder to be able to just go index a bunch of tokens and now they get a ton more score and then influence a vote. So it's just snapshot of this specific block. And that means these scores are going to be calculated for everybody who votes that way. And so this is just a test snapshot that we've created to kind of get the community to look at it and understand how it works. And as you can see, we've already got a bunch of people who have voted, which is awesome. Just as I posted it in the chat there. So this is really, you know, the power of Snapshot. None of these votes cost money. What Snapshot does is it takes a signature from your Ethereum wallet and uses it through the Snapshot hub, and they calculate the score and it posts it here. And this is all run on Snapshot's UI. So as you can see, that's a point of centralization that Snapshot or whoever is in charge of the hub is running the UI that calculates the scores. Now, the good thing about that is you can go to the strategies, which are, it doesn't pop out there, but Snapshot.js. You can see all the strategies in Snapshot and you can actually review the code yourself. So if you go here and you search the graph, you'll find we have our 3 strategies there. And so it allows us to confirm that it's actually the scores are being run correctly. Now, like I've said, this is a step towards decentralization. And, you know, we've seen a bunch of different projects use Snap successfully. And, you know, we're super excited to work with Snapshot. Take a step in the right direction, give all the stakeholders in the network the ability to share their voice based on, you know, not just what people are saying in discourse. Because one of the things about, you know, this is a different data point and it shows how users are able to vote based on how much GRT they hold, which is it's a very important metric in the network. As opposed to discourse, where it's just people who are speaking and using words, right? And sometimes, you know, it could be a group of people who make multiple accounts and, you know, fake that there's 20 people upset about something. At least it's very hard to fake. You would actually have to go purchase a ton of GRT if you wanted to influence it. Or influence a decision made that maybe people were talking about in discourse.
And one thing I'll just add there, sorry, real quick, is just that right now the 3 strategies that we have do involve some level of GRT, right? So, you know, delegators, indexers, token holders, those are all sort of related to GRT in one way or another. But the beauty, as kind of Dave has mentioned, of this approach is that you can define strategies that are sort of based on arbitrary logic. So like you could have one in the future where one of the stakeholder groups is subgraph developers, and like the weight of their vote could be proportional to the amount of query fees they've generated for the network. And in theory, like you could build a great subgraph and deploy it to the network and get use on it without even, you know, that's not proportional directly to your GRT holdings. Like that's proportional to some other contribution that you've made to the network that we have like a quantitative weight for. And so these are the kind of things that we can experiment with off-chain voting, you know, as Dave mentioned, these things could work their way into something that's more, you know, formalized on chain, you know, in the future. But this is a great test bed for those sorts of ideas.
Thanks. Yeah, 100% right there. And yeah, I think I've actually kind of covered everything here. There are more strategies we want to see. Specifically, you know, subgraph developers and curators are obvious ones, but anybody from the community could write the strategy as well and comment on the strategies that have been written in Snapshot. It would be great to get feedback there. The description of them will also be posted in Discourse so that it can be reviewed for maybe people who are not used to writing code. And I think the last thing I'll mention as well as part of the way the strategies are written, just for some clarity, is if you are a holder of a Townhall wallet, the voting power from those token lock wallets actually get attributed to your beneficiary account. And that's simply because token lock wallets are not externally owned accounts, and therefore they can't actually sign anything, and therefore you wouldn't be able to vote with a token lock wallet. So it just is natural that we would attribute that voting power to a beneficiary address, because that is the address that acts on behalf of the token wallet in the network anyways. So yeah, that's everything. Thanks for paying attention and going to vote and see how many votes we have now.
So you
Already
got a couple-
150 million there.
Yeah, people have been voting during your chat. You got a couple questions here.
Indexers.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So one person was, someone asked, and this was answered in chat, but any particular reason why curator stake is excluded from the snapshot vote at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Essentially, it's just a work in progress, and easy way to say it is, I didn't have time to do it right now. But as well, there's very, very few curators compared to delegators and indexers in the network in terms of staked or indexed or curated GRT. And that's simply just what we've seen if you go to the network page of the graph. And as more subgraphs get on the actual network, we will see that increase, and then it'll become a lot more important. But right now, if you were a curator, it wouldn't affect this vote too much.
Someone also wants to know, is a snapshot built on the graph?
It actually is into the graph, which is pretty cool, because the way that I'm calculating these strategies, I'm actually hitting a subgraph, which is great, because as I started to use Snapshot and integrate with it, it was cool to see, all this work that the graph protocol has been doing, that I've been a part of, is something that I actually end up working with completely early, and I didn't know it was going to happen. So it just shows you the power of decentralization. That people like, Snapshot is already tied into us, and there's a bunch of other projects like Sushi and like 5 or 6 others that also use a subgraph for their strategies.
Maybe the last question, someone asked, what's the risk of exchanges, or the possibility of exchanges influencing a lot of the base GRT strategy? Yeah,
that's a great question. Right now, I don't personally know of any exchanges are actually delegating or indexing. If they just have a balance, they will actually almost always, at least in this form of the scoring, they're going to get kind of normalized by the fact that indexers, if you're an actual indexer in the network, you're likely to have your vote increase. Same with the delegator. So that's good in that sense. But that is something that people have seen in the past in decentralized voting, is these exchanges like Binance and Kraken have huge balances, and they're able to swing votes maybe for their own benefit. And that is something really important, really good question, and it's worthwhile considering. A good thing to note is there are ways to write strategies to probably keep them out of the scoring.
One thing I'll add to that is just that there's nothing magic about this roll-up score. Like, that's kind of an artifact of how Snapshot works, is that they kind of want multiple strategies on the same page to roll up to a single vote score. So Dave kind of went through the work of normalizing. But you can also just look at each stakeholder group individually, and that in many cases might be more interesting, right? Rather than looking at the roll-up score to see, okay, what did delegators think about this proposal? What did indexers think? And if like the community stakeholder groups consistently, vote one way, but then for some reason we just see this sort of like outlier behavior in like the token holders, like that could be a good indication that, maybe someone's trying to, use a whale or an exchange, or someone's buying GRT to try and influence the vote, but it won't necessarily be effective in manipulating those other stakeholder groups.
Yeah, 100%. Cool.
So, awesome. Someone also wanted me to mention that, can we bring to light that you look like Mark Wahlberg?
Wow. I may have gotten that once or twice before. So, wow, I guess it's a compliment.
We'll make sure to include that in the official minutes.
Yeah, let's get that in there. Cool. I'll
Awesome.
pass it off to Eva.
Yeah, so next up we have Ariel to discuss protocol upgrade proposals.
Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you all. I see a lot of faces in the gallery. I'm switching back to view, to the single view. I want to show a bit as we are discussing governance, one of the important part of governance is like discussion and proposing new ideas and changes. So we have the forum where like different people that are following the graph are proposing and raising issues and discussing about new ideas. And about all the ideas that we are seeing in the forum, I want to focus on a couple of them that might end up being upgrades in the protocol. One of these ones is the rewards for indexers when they are paid out by allocating and collecting indexing rewards. This is something that has been discussed in multiple, I would say, like postings. And what I try to do is to create one proposal for, let's say, solving or changing the standard behavior of the protocol in this sense, and to create some discussions around this. So the basic idea of what this being discussed is that indexing rewards are distributed based on inflation, based on the base token supply of the protocol, and it's based on the amount of tokens staked on a particular subgraph and the amount of tokens allocated per indexer. Okay, when allocations are created and are closed, there's a calculation that is being done, and the tokens are sent back to us to the stake, right? I mean, to the indexer stake. That means that an indexer, if he wants to take out the rewards, needs to unstake and needs to wait 28 days for that, the thawing period. There's an additional issue with that because it's, I would say 99% of the indexers are under token locks, and the token locks avoid them to basically withdraw this stake and allow this to happen only if the contracts see a profit. And to see a profit, they need to unstake most of the tokens. So that means that they need to remove a lot of capital from the protocol if they want to take some rewards out. And why do they maybe want to take some rewards out from the protocol? They are paying a lot of like infrastructure costs. They are paying for some costs by sending transactions to Ethereum and for paying the gas price. So that's the main discussion around this upgrade proposal. So I described a potential implementation. Basically, we discussed like two different options. A lot of ideas from different people in the community, super helpful. Some indexers proposing like a different option to make it more gas efficient. So there were like many postings during the last, we'll say, weeks. So the current status of this is I created a PR with a potential solution that has been discussed in GitHub. So I encourage like everyone to comment on the code and maybe look at it and review it. So that you'll see like this discussion around the PR for many days. And what we did is to deploy this fix to the testnet. So we are giving the chance to indexers to test the implementation using the testnet with actual like GRT from the testnet and using even token logs in testnet. And we are also like doing an audit on this PR. But what I want to say is like this is an alternative implementation. Like there could be like different ones. So the idea is that through governance we gain support on this implementation by the different stakeholders in the community, and that's the way to let's say promote this particular implementation that will solve something that is being discussed in the community by the council basically voting on this on chain. But like many things need to happen for that to be deployed and implemented. So this is one of the things. The other one that I want to talk about is the I would say a bug fix due to an edge condition. I described this in a different post in the forum. This is happening. This is something that is not like affecting the operation now because it's basically on an edge condition that is not happening in the network. That is, if we have someone curating a subgraph, and this and we have indexers allocating on that subgraph, and for some reason the complete amount of signal from that subgraph go back to 0, we get to an edge condition where the rewards calculation is basically reverting. And the workaround for that case is that basically indexers opting out of rewards. But for that to happen, again, that needs to, we need the like a subgraph being curated and then burn all the signal of that subgraph. And as we are not having like a lot of curation and indexers like subgraph allocating on a different subgraph, that for this condition to happen is not usual. But we have a solution for that in a PR too. We need to review it and we need to have some discussion around that. So I encourage again, like all the stakeholders to look at the proposed implementation and discuss that and to provide feedback. Okay. There's one more proposal I want to discuss, but I will leave Gavin to propose it because he's the one that wrote the post in the forum. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any question?
Yeah, before we move on to, I guess, Gavin, was there any feedback or questions around, the proposals that Ariel's described so far?
It was a bit technical, but you can send some.
I think a lot of people
have
voiced their opinion on the forums too. I've seen a lot of indexers talking specifically about the first proposal you discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, folks in chat are saying very needed for indexers, but cool. Yeah, we can move on to Gavin then.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Yeah, and great work on the proposal to change how lock token contracts work. So maybe I should start with here. I've got a hard stop in 10 minutes, so I'll try to make it somewhat quick. I made slides, but I'm just not going to use them. So yeah, I'm Gavin. I'm from Figment. We've got a few indexers. I've been personally involved in staking protocols for about 1.5 years now, working with them in various ways, and I had involvement in governance and strategy and everything staking. I proposed this. It's a very, I don't know if this would be considered GRC, probably. We've been talking to some of the folks that worked on the graph and some of the people who are involved in using it. And our understanding is that essentially the graph, the way that the delegator and indexer relationship works, it wasn't really intended to work this way. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, or I could leave that to Brandon or somebody else to kind of give some context there. Maybe I'll just start by saying that what I think is in scope, what I'm looking to discuss here is like a broad overview of what we want as an outcome, and what I personally would like to see is stable cut rates. And what's out of scope, it would be like implementation specifics. I think that's after the GRC, as Brandon outlined in that process. Or no, sorry, was it Brandon? No, it was David who outlined that process. If it goes into from a draft stage into like an implementation stage, then maybe those would be in scope. So it's mostly about like, what do we want? if we could just snap our fingers and have everything change, what could we get? How could we make things better? And so from what I can see, what the problem is here is that, and this was kind of misleading maybe by saying unintuitive, but really the core issue here is that the commission rates, or sorry, the cut rates are volatile. We see something really similar. We see a similar kind of language in Livepeer. I saw Yondan's here as well. Livepeer has you know, there's new issuance rewards, and then there are also fees for transcoding, and we see something very similar here with the graph. And they use cut rates as the language. So right now what happens is that everybody, so the indexer has to put up their own bond in order to attract delegations, and whatever the indexer earns on their own bond is just kind of lumped together with everything that the delegators earn, and then there's this kind of fixed divide called a cut rate, whether it's the reward cut or the fee cut, and then after it's been divided, then there's this pro rata distribution that happens just for the delegators, and technically it works, but I think I think that we should change it so that if a delegation changes, it doesn't suddenly throw off what the outcome is for what the indexer takes from the delegator's earnings. So, you know, like the ideal outcome of this sort of change, we would see that it doesn't matter if new delegators join or depart. You know, delegators that have stayed with that indexer aren't going to see what they effectively pay to the delegator, or sorry, effectively pay to the indexer, varying wildly. So, you know, the way that we would do this, the way that I think that we could do this is that, and I don't know anything about what this does for the existing system or whatever, like I said, out of scope, but if I could snap my fingers and make it all different, what I'd like to do is I'd like for the indexer to earn on their self bond, and that to be unrelated to what happens with delegators. So I've got a demonstration for that, and I'll walk you through that. Gotta get this out of my way. So in this demonstration, in this scenario, we've got an indexer. I just set the effective rewards rate to be 6%, assuming that, you know, 50% of the network staking and the new issuance rate's 3%. That's also called inflation. I think it's a poor term, blah, blah, blah. So indexer has 100 GRT staked, and then they have two delegators, 200 and 300 respectively. And, you know, we see a total stake of 600 currently, and we can expect, you know, in a year, 36 GRT to be distributed. And let's say our goal as the indexer is to take 10% of what our delegators earn in our partnership. Any questions so far? How are things? I'm not monitoring chat, so it's kind of noisy. It's historically been noisy, so I'll just surface anything if there's something important there, if possible.
Yeah, no questions in chat yet. A couple people saying very needed for indexers. So.
Okay, cool. So I took this, and actually that reminds me, I took this to the forum, and there was, I'm really glad to see that there's engagement. I'm sorry that I had difficulty like understanding everything that everybody said. I just want to make note that like this work is kind of hard, like to propose something new is really hard because defaults weigh very heavily. And understandably so that people are reticent to consider how changing might mess up something unexpectedly. but yeah, if you can do whatever work you can do to try to streamline what it is that you say and to make it as clear as possible, doing that work to process it as much upfront really helps, because typically it's one person championing this change, and one person doesn't scale well. So if you write a wall of text, maybe work through it over and over again until you really get the key details, because I think that will really help make sure that what it is that's most important to you rises to the surface and can be addressed effectively. So yeah, in the current implementation, if our goal as an indexer is to take 10% of what our delegators are earning in our partnership, then and that's the assumption for our that's also the assumption for anyone delegating. They see that that's the effective take from this relationship, and that's been implemented in the user interfaces. So great. I've got this effective cut calculator. This is what we use. This is what Figment uses. We use this because we need to kind of figure out if we want to take 10%, we need to do a calculation in order to ensure that we set the right cut rate to get 10% effectively. And then we'll reverse it as well to make sure that our math kind of makes sense. But we need this. We need this because of the volatility of the current implementation. So, when I plug in 10%, when I say I want it to effectively take 10%, my calculator tells me I should use 25% cut rate. And when I put in 25%, I can verify that. So this is what we do. We set it to 25%. We get what we would expect here. If we're taking, if the total stake is 600 and the earnings are 36, 6%. If we're taking 25% from all the staked all the earnings, we're going to get 9 GRT, and our delegator 1 is going to get, they're going to get their pro rata portion of the remaining 75%, and so is delegator 2. And if we just do a sanity check here, we see that it all adds up. So the total is 36, and that's how it's divided. And that looks fine, right? But I guess the problem comes into effect when you have a third delegator who shows up. And now all of a sudden, we have, it looks like what we're effectively taking is 17.5%. And we don't want to do that. But there's this cooldown, right? If our cooldown isn't set to the lowest possible amount, like 1 block or whatever, it means that we can't adjust it. So now, because this other third delegator showed up, we have no latitude to be able to. Delegator 1 and delegator 2 are going to effectively be earning less. So if we remove this delegator, now it's 10.8, and then we add delegator 3, now it's 9.9 delegator 1 is earning, for example. But sorry,
I'm just going to say we only have about a minute left. I know you have a hard stop. I wanted to hear if anyone had feedback, either maybe Ariel, Brandon, or anyone else in chat, just so we can get some discussion before you head out. It seems like most people are in agreement that this would help for both delegators and indexers.
Okay, cool, thanks. And just like to compare our proposed implementation, the idea here is that, if you add, like we're going to add another delegator, we still see 10.8, we still see 16.2, we remove them. It's the same, it holds stable, right? We don't have to adjust our cut rate. And if suddenly delegator 2 decides to leave, now all of a sudden we're giving away our effective reward is a negative cut. So we're actually giving away rewards to delegator 1. Now delegator 1 went from earning 10.8 to 13.5 GRT. Whereas here, once again, delegator 1 has remained stable at 10.8.
Yeah. So I ran the numbers a few weeks ago for a presentation, and I think like the average delegation ratio, like in the for most indexers, was somewhere around like 3 to 4, in the 3 to 4 range. and that's out of a total delegation ratio or capacity that's like 16x right now, right? That's set in the protocol. So that means that most indexers in the protocol, the rewards that they're giving away, their effective cut, as Gavin described it, is probably actually a lot higher than like the actual cut that they set. So that's just an example of how like that inconsistency is kind of manifesting in the protocol, that most indexers today are probably giving away some amount up above and beyond what they intended to. And then as their delegation shifts, like that effective rate changes, which, I think as Gavin has communicated well, creates a lot of unpredictability on both sides of that market, right? For indexers and for delegators.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had issues on other networks with certain staking service providers setting 0% commission, and everybody kind of being a little bit up in arms with this. Actually allows them to have a negative commission rate to bribe people to stake with them, and then you can't really leave very easily. Otherwise, you're giving up rewards for 28 days. You're burning. And then there's some other things that maybe are out of scope. Like, I don't think that there should be the ability to over delegate at all. And maybe we should re-examine whether we want stickiness like that. Stake is already sticky in networks that don't have incentive mechanisms to make it sticky. So, but anyway, those are other things that maybe we should be thinking about. If anyone has questions about this sort of thing, please, like I said, try to streamline them, use the forum. And make a copy of this, try it out for yourselves. Thank you for your time. I'm going to run.
Awesome. Thank you. And are you able to share the demo in the forum as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I have. I
Okay,
believe
awesome.
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much. We're just at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us for our first Protocol Town Hall. We'll be sharing the recording and notes in the forum and hope to see you next month.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.